Yo.
Boom.
Yo, we had to bring my man Cash back. The people want Cash back. So what? We had to get Cash back. And we're not talking about no credit cards. You know what I'm saying? This isn't no Amex Cash back. This is the Cash Money. Mike is back on the Mike Gomes channel. You feel me? Let's freaking get rocking and rolling.
Ready to rock and roll.
Cash, what are we going over today, bro?
What are we going over today? So we're going to go over, I know you've got a killer sales process that you go through. So you reached out to me and you go, Cash, I got a killer idea. Let's go ahead and merge the two together and show the people how we kind of integrate seller finance into a sales process. So that's what we're going to do today.
I freaking love it. So guys, it's important that you have a sales process. Why is it important to have a sales process? It's important to have a sales process because if you don't have one, you're going to fall victim to the prospect. Whether you're selling shoes, you're selling cars, you're trying to buy houses, whatever, right? Whoever the prospect is, you have to have your own process because if you don't, the prospect has their own process. It's almost like when you go into a shoe store, right? Right, Cash? When you go into a shoe store like Foot Locker or something like that, you walk in, you go to, just look at everything, look at the shoes and stuff, and you might buy something, you might not. But the salesperson comes up to you. And what does the salesperson say? Hey, what brings you in today? And what does Cash say?
Well, I'm coming in to get some new shoes.
Okay, well, Cash knows what he wants. But most people say, right? Most people say something along the lines of like, just looking. Right? Like a lot of people walk in the store and like, no, I'm good. I'm just looking. Right? And then the salesperson will say, all right, cool. Let me know if you need something. And they never get a sale. So that prospect that walked in the shoe store had their own sales process. They do that every single time they walk in a shoe store. Like that's embedded in them, right? Mm-hmm. And what happened? The salesperson fell victim to that prospect walking in the shoe store. So what I would do if I was selling shoes, I would say, great, what are you looking for? I would already have that process in my thing. And then they would tell me, I'm probably looking for something like some Nikes or something like that. Cool. Let me bring you over to the Nikes. And that's something that I would have in my tool belt at all times. Now I didn't fall victim to the prospect's sales process because they have their own. So let's run down the sales process that I use in my business. And this is a mixture of a bunch of different stuff that I learned from a bunch of different people, a bunch of different books. And this is just what we use right now. Actually, it's a similar process that I've had the whole entire time. I've always kind of used the same process, but I just did a new one that I implemented into the team probably a couple of weeks ago, and I put it on my channel not too long ago called the 8-step sales process. So I'm just going to briefly go over that. So
awesome.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen right here. Mike, do you have anything?
I've got some people on IG Live. I'm going to push them over to this YouTube channel right now. For those of you who are watching on IG, there is a link for Mike's YouTube channel. Head over there. You can ask some questions. We're going to tie in the sales process along with seller finance. Go ahead, head over there now. All right, Mike, you go ahead.
Let's rock and roll. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to briefly go over my 8-step sales process, and then we'll answer some questions, and then we'll tie into how the hell does seller finance tie into all this stuff, right?
Love it.
So we want people to ask questions. We want to be resourceful for people. So let's go over this really quick. First thing is first. You have your intro / bonding. Okay. So when you first talk to a prospect, this could be the salesman at the shoe store, right? They greet the person. They make the person know that they're a caring person, that they're going to take care of them, and then that they're an actual human being. Same thing, just like when you're on the phones. You want to bond with the person. You want to make the person smile right away. Okay? So this is fairly simple. Actually, I'm going to back up a little bit. It's not fairly simple because a lot of people mess this stuff up. A lot of people go right into the call and sound super salesy. Hey, this is Mike calling from Cash Offer Homes. How you doing? Click. Hey, have you ever thought about getting an offer on your property? Click. Hey, Mike, how you doing? Wait, who's this? I'm doing good. Mike, Mike, who? Oh, I'm doing great too, man. Whatever, right? Like just bonding with the person.
Uh-huh.
So number two is what we call rapport. Rapport. Now, a lot of people will teach rapport, and they'll say, "Hey, you gotta." Essentially, this is what they do. They talk about rapport as bonding. I don't think of it that way. I think of rapport more as like figuring out the situation, right? Like, think about it. If me and Mike were just having a conversation, me and Mike talk on the phone all the time. And typically, those conversations are geared towards, like, hey, what's your life? Like, what's going on in your life? What's going on in your business and stuff like that? That is rapport. Me and Mike are building rapport on every single conversation. We're talking about each other's lifestyle and what's going on in our life and our business and our family life and everything. That is rapport. That's figuring out the situation. Like, what's the situation in your business, bro? What are you dealing with right now? What's your problems, right? That's rapport. So, rapport for us in wholesaling, right, is figuring out the seller situation when it comes to the house and their overall situation. Okay. So we're figuring out the situation. We're asking something like, hey, so just give me the rundown of the whole situation. Right. And then they start going into, yeah, I mean, so what do you want to know? Oh, just give me the rundown of like everything that you've talked to anybody up to this point about the property.
How
And then
difficult is it, Mike? What's the difference between trying to intro and trying to build rapport when you're going outbound as compared to inbound? Is it easier for you on the inbound leads? And what's the difference between the two?
yeah, inbound's obviously much easier. Like if you're doing PPC or something like that,
Mhm.
inbound is super easy. Like, you know what I'm gonna say, and people are gonna hate on me for this, but PPC is cheating. That's not sales. It's too easy. This is too easy. They give you like literally they give you this on the write up. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Like when you go to fill out one of the Google sheets, one of the Google ad sheets, they should name instead of like motivation, right? Because they have that when a PPC lead goes to submit their information on their web form, right? They have something like a little ticker that says motivation, right? Like why would you sell a property? And they fill it out for you. Granted, PPC leads, like you're gonna have to dig a little bit more and stuff like that, but dude, you don't have to do anything. They're freaking easy. Give me a PPC lead, and I promise you, I will beat any other person in sales on PPC leads because it's so easy.
So an inbound lead, people who are spending the money on PPC and are looking to get a return on their investment. Mike's saying that if you do spend your money on PPC, that it's going to be much easier because they will have already filled out a form and you will have everything at your fingertips. Correct?
100%. Here's what I would recommend. I actually, this is why I recommend this. I would recommend doing cold calling and texting. I'm not recommending you do the cold calling and texting. I recommend hiring a virtual assistant because cold calling and texting isn't really worth our time. But I would recommend getting those types of leads
Mhm.
and forcing yourself to learn how to bond and learn how to build rapport with those types of leads rather than PPC. And here's why. I do say PPC leads are easy, but I say that now because of the point that I'm in, because I've been hammering this type of process for a while now. Okay. So if you put a PPC lead in front of my face, I'm like, I'm freaking eating that thing up. This is cake. You know what I'm saying? Now, the reason why I say I would do cold calling and texting before PPC is because I tried PPC before cold calling and texting before I ever knew a sales process. And I spent a bunch of money and messed up the leads. So I'm not saying that it's super easy. I'm saying that PPC leads are super easy once you know what the heck you're doing. Does that make
You're saying
sense?
once you got the yeah, so once you got your sale process down, you've put the reps in, you've been through a bunch of calls and stuff. Now it becomes a little bit easier when you have an inbound lead. But for the stuff we're going to talk about today, we're technically talking about outbound prospecting, correct?
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's all the same stuff. You're going to want to use a sales process no matter what type of lead it is. Like you're
Okay.
gonna want to make sure what I call all these numbers, these 8 things, right? I call them all buckets, and you got to fill up the buckets before you move on to the next step. You
Got
know what
it.
I'm saying? So all I'm saying with a PPC lead, these buckets are already freaking filled up for you. Not fully, but they're already pretty filled up. When you got like cold calling and texting leads, the buckets aren't that filled. Aren't that filled. You gotta fill them up yourself. So
Got it.
report to us is like, hey, catch me up to speed. What's going on with the property? What's your situation? Okay. After we get the seller situation, right? We as professionals should understand their situation up to this point, and we should understand the pain in their situation. This is important because a lot of people do this different. A lot of people think that you got to start digging into pain, right? I think digging into pain is still rapport, right? Meaning asking questions like, hey, have you ever thought about renting this property out and those types of things and getting them to tell you, oh, no, I wouldn't rent it out because this, that, and the other, right? That's still rapport. That's figuring out the situation. Pain, what we do for number 3, since we have the whole entire story from now, we look for the pain and we know that there's pain because we just got the whole story. Now, essentially, what we do is we twist the knife and we make them feel the pain in number 3.
Let's talk about pain for a second, because some of
Mhm.
the some of the people that I come across and some of the people that I train have a hard time distinguishing the different types of pain. So explain to them just a little bit the different types of pain and what they can potentially be for each seller individually. Because sometimes it doesn't always look like pain, right?
Yeah, yeah. So here's the thing. There's essentially 2 different types of pain. There's pain where you can see it, like literally, you got a cut and you can see bleeding coming out. Like, dude, you're in freaking pain. You know what I'm saying? You have a black eye or something like that. You're in pain. You could see somebody's in pain.
And
Then
what would
there's
that be? Like something like that? What would that be? Like somebody's in pain.
those are all like the completely obvious pain points. Like they're going through foreclosure and they're about to lose the property. They're going through a divorce. The house caught on fire or something like that. Something that's screaming at you like, yo, this is a painful situation. They just lost a family member. The house got passed down to them and they don't know what the heck to do. They don't have the money to keep up with the house and stuff like that. That's evident pain, right? That's like somebody limping or somebody that has a cast on or somebody that has crutches. Like that's evident. You can see that. Okay.
Love that.
Now there's other people, right? Like if we're talking about patients at a doctor sees that pain. A doctor sees the freaking broken arm, right? It's swollen up. A doctor sees everything that you can see physically, or you can see him limping or something like that, right? You know that your patient is in pain. However, there's another patient that comes in. There's a patient that just comes in for a checkup, right? And you check their vitals, you check their internals and everything like that. And you see pain as a doctor that the patient doesn't see. So essentially you are creating the pain there. You're creating essentially the motivation. And a lot of the times the seller finance deals that come a fruit are the second type of pain patient, right? They're the pain patient that the doctor has to like go check the vitals and look at everything. And they're like, wait, dude, hold on. You're you're about to pay a crazy tax bill because they don't know it. The patient walks in the door and the patient's like, hey, yeah, I think I'm healthy. I'm good.
That's
See
a
what I'm
great
saying?
analogy, right? So, like somebody walks into a doctor's office and might have a pain in their neck that technically the doctor couldn't see, right?
Mhm.
As opposed to somebody walking into the doctor with a broken ankle and limping in, to your point, having evident pain is one, right? Which would be a foreclosure, divorce, like you said, inherited, maybe the house caught fire. But a non evident pain would be something that you would have to technically pry and ask questions for to understand what kind of pain they're in. And that kind of pain could technically be something like you just said, maybe a tax bill, maybe there's, I don't know. Give me another one, Mikey.
Here's what it's like. You know how when you go to the doctors and the nurse comes in before,
Hmm.
that nurse isn't like she's just like a helping nurse, right? Not saying that she's uneducated, but she's not as educated as a doctor. Now that nurse is going to see something like a foreclosure equivalent to like a cut that needs stitches or something like that. They know something's wrong.
Hmm.
So it's easy. It's easy to find that pain point. But the second one is when the doctor comes in, when the nurse is like, "Oh yeah, I think homeboy's good," right? And then the doctor comes in, and the doctor has to dig in, and he's educated, right? So he knows the questions to ask. He knows once he sees the overall like data with the vitals and stuff that something's wrong here. So what's the difference between the two? Education on the vitals.
Very, very smart. Awesome. So I love that. I love kind of breaking it down like that because there's so many people who just really equate pain with foreclosures, right? Again, there's so many different strategies, right? And when you get into like subject to and seller finance, you're really after you get through number one, right, with your intro and your bonding. Number two, you're trying to build rapport and you're doing a little bit of your fact find, right? Technically, you could find a house that somebody's been paying the tax bill on that doesn't seem like they're in pain, but
Mhm.
that is a pain point because it's starting to take money out of their pocket every single month. So that's a great analogy.
Yeah, you're not essentially creating pain like a lot of people think. A lot of people think with seller finance deals that you create pain. The pain's already there. You're just educating on somebody that there's pain. And you're not telling them that there's pain. You're making them come up with it on their own. Because at the end of the day, Pace always says this. He always says a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. So if you go in there and you're telling him like, dude, you're bad. You're losing money every single month and you're gonna have a huge tax bill and all these things, right? That doesn't make the prospect feel good. So you got to make them come up with that on their own, right? So you got to make them say, wait, yeah, I mean, you know, I kind of am losing every single month, right? They got to come up with that on their own. So what do you do with that? How do you get that? How do you get them to come up with that on their own? You ask questions, and you essentially it's almost like it's the back to the doctor analogy. When he's like, hey, well, how do you feel when I press right here? And he's like, damn, yeah, that hurts.
Uh-huh.
You know what I'm saying? You got to
Yep.
make them to be convinced themselves. You can't convince them. The doctor can't push right there and say, "Hey," it can't point right there and say, "Hey, you're in pain right there," and the patient's sitting there like, "Dude, what the hell are you talking about? I'm not in pain." The
Love
doctor
that.
has to push the arm so the patient says, "Dang, yeah, I get it. I'm in pain, bro."
All right, what's
So
number four, Mike?
so number four. So before I go there, right? These two are the most important, I would say. Everything's equivalently important, but you can get the job done with just these two, right? If you bring these two to any closer, you're going to get the deal done, right? So what like there's people out here that haven't called at all. Maybe they're going to make their first call today after this freaking live. I would say get these two. These two are the most important. Reason being is because let's just say you bring Mike a lead, right? Um, and I'm like, okay, great. What's going on with the property? And you're telling me, well, it needs a new roof and this and that. I'm like, dude, what am I going to do with that information? I don't know. You gotta give me the idea of the whole entire story of the seller and why they would ever sell their property. That's the first question I'm going to ask you. Hey, why would they ever sell? And most of the people, when they bring me a lead, they're like, oh, I don't know. Well, dude, then it's not a lead if they have no motivation to sell. They'll look at an address, right? I get people that tell me this all the time. They'll send me an address. They'll say, "Hey, Mike, I think this is a good deal." I'm like, "Okay, what's going on with the seller?" They're like, "I don't know. I never talked to them." I'm like, "Dude, you haven't even talked to them yet. You haven't even done number one." They're like, yeah, it just looks like a beat up house. I'm like, dog, that's not a lead until you actually talk to somebody. So number four, Number 4 is what we call budget. So this is kind of the next steps. We're essentially starting to get into the negotiation here, right? At this point, they've convinced themselves at this point that they need to sell their freaking property and that they're in some pain. Right? Now we're trying to make a deal here. So budget. What is this? This is money. There's two things. Essentially, how much? So how much do you need? And then why? So how much do you need and why do you need that amount of money? What do you need that amount of money for? And it's not as simple as just asking them, hey, how much? So, I mean, if somebody came in and dealt with all this pain, right? You kind of bring the pain back up. You're always bringing the pain back up. And you say, somebody came in and bought the property. I mean, how much would you want? That's an easy question, right? You just got to be confident and say it. There's no like slick way to go about it. You just act. Here's what you do. You just act like it's a normal everyday question. Okay, great. How much do you want? They're like, I'm thinking maybe 180,000. Got it. Okay. Then you don't go right to them and say, okay, why do you want the 180,000? Because what are they going to say? What would somebody say, Mike, if somebody was like, if you were my seller and I said, okay, Mike, you want 180, why?
Here's what I love about this, right? Is because at this point, when you're asking these questions, this is
Mhm.
where you start to determine which strategy you're going to deploy and why, right, Mike?
100%. You're actually doing that up here.
Gotcha.
You're already starting to plot that. Throughout this whole entire thing, you're plotting in your head, okay, what deal am I about to structure here?
All right. So let's say that you're going through the rapport, you're going through the pain, you start to think to yourself, all right, I'm going to start to deploy this. And then you get to number 4 and you've got the question, how much do you need and why? And you
Mhm.
as a wholesaler, and I'm not saying you specifically, I'm just saying wholesalers in general are now looking at it through one lens, right? And saying, hey, I've got to buy it at a discount. But you now have a seller that wants the 180,000 and the 180,000 sits right at the top of the market. Now it's like, now what do you do? So when you are faced with a seller who's really tied to the number, Mike, what are you
Mhm.
doing from that point when somebody says, hey, I want the 180? You know it's not going to work for a cash deal. You know it might not work for an ovation deal. What are you
Yeah,
doing with that number?
we got to figure this out, bro. And that's what I was just asking you, right? Like a lot of people, when they hear that you got to go over the budget step and you're like, hey, you got to figure out why they want that number, they'll just flat out ask them, okay, why do you want 180? But it's kind of an offensive question, right? Because that's
Mhm.
what I want, right? That's typically the response that they'll get. So that's not the way that I go about getting the why. I go about getting the why. And to back up a little bit to answer your question, I don't beat them up about 180. I don't say, no, dude, your property. Oh, you're tripping. You're not getting 180 for this property. Not ever. I see comps here for like 180 all fixed up, right? I don't tell them that they're wrong. I'm never telling a prospect that they're wrong. It's like the number one rule of selling. So I kind of let it rock. And I'm like, oh, okay, great. So like, have you talked to your real estate agent? What do they say about it? And they say, yeah, it's worth 180. Okay, what would you have to do to the property in order to get it up to speed for 180? Right. I'm asking those type of questions. And then once I get into the real why of this, I'm asking them something like, okay, um, well, hey, I mean, it sounds like you could potentially maybe get 180 for this property at some point, maybe if some work's done to the property or something like that. But let's just say somebody did come in with 180. Like, what are your plans with the money? And
What do you need the money for? Yeah, exactly. Great point.
that that is the why, not just flat out asking why do they need 180? It doesn't work like that. You're gonna get either hung up on or you're gonna start friction. Got it. Okay, cool. Yeah. I mean, I could see maybe getting 180 at some point. If somebody came in with 180, what would your plans be? I gotta go build another house, or I'm gonna go pay off this, or da 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 da. You're figuring out the why. The reason why you're doing all this is because you're teeing yourself up for later. And I'll go on. Mike, do you want to go over budget anymore?
No, that's perfect. I wanted the viewers to understand that because even what it really is all about, right, is like to Mike's point with the rapport building. When you're starting correctly and you got the intro and the bonding and the rapport building, you're really trying to dig deep about the who, what, where, why, and when of all of it. And once you compile that stuff, it makes it easier to leverage later on. Yeah, let's keep going, Mike.
Love it. So once you get into the numbers, and there's a lot that goes into this stuff. There's like I'm bringing realtors into the conversation. I'm bringing up like realtors commission and closing costs and like the absolutely net number that they would ever get in their pocket. Like I'm doing some ninja shit here. That's next level stuff that we can go over that maybe on another live here. But for number 5, actually before I go to number 5, I forgot to add a little something. Typically, I'll ask just a little condition question up here in the report, just small. I don't dig deep on the condition like every other wholesaler does. That's freaking annoying. Hey, can you rate your property 1 through 10 on how good this property is in the condition that it's in? Right? I don't do that. I just typically just tell them, ask them, hey, so could you tell me like what the house looks like? The reason why I'm doing that, I don't really care. I'm just going to use that as a negotiation tactic for the end, right? Because even when they do give you the condition, they're most likely going to lie to you about it. It's not going to be the actual condition until you see the pictures or you actually go out to the property. But number 5, we're getting into the decision. You know, I freaking stink at spelling, but we're going to rock and roll. This is why we got spell check.
You and me both, bud. Is it the C or the S that comes first?
I don't know, Bob. We don't care about that. So there's 2 things to this, the decision bucket. There's how they are making the decision. So you're kind of just justifying in your head and getting them to come up with it again. Like I said, a man get convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. You're getting them to come up with the justifications on how they're making the decision. So I'm asking something like, hey, if you could look at yourself in 3 months once this property is sold, like what problems have you solved? And that's going to give you the justifications of why they would ever sell the property. So I'm getting the how they're making the decision because I'm using it later. I'm also getting the who's. So I'm getting the who do you need to contact for this info? Like, do you need to contact your attorney, your spouse, your cousin, the trustees, or whoever, right? That way I don't have to come back. Because if I get all the way here and I find out that they need to talk to their wife or they need to do something like that, I'm immediately stopping the sales process. I'm giving the seller homework to go talk to their wife about everything that we just talked about. And then I'm getting back in later on a different call. So that's important. Again, now that I bring that up, it's important for people to realize this isn't how every call goes. It doesn't just go boom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like sometimes you get stuck right here in the pain. No, not in the pain, in the budget, right? Sometimes you get stuck in the budget and they don't know. They need to talk to their accountant. They need to talk to, their spouse about the money or something like that. I'm always, when that happens and I'm not able to fill that bucket up, I don't keep going through the sales process. I just tell them, okay, great. Well, why don't you go have a conversation with your wife and go over the books and figure out where you guys need to be, and then we'll talk tomorrow. So I'm giving them homework and I'm following up on the homework if I ever get stuck throughout the process. Does that make sense?
Love it. Yeah, love it.
So
Go ahead. No, number 6.
Number 6. This is fulfillment. And essentially what fulfillment is you're wrapping everything up that we just went through, okay? And you're telling them everything that we just went through, right? You're getting them to feel the pain again. You're going over the budget. You're going over the decisions, right? And you're wrapping it all up in a gift. And then you're asking them if we could do this, that, and the other, right? After you went over their pain. Hey, I mean, you got this property here that, you've been paying taxes on. It hasn't made you any money. I know you want $180,000 for this property and your wife's on board at this point. If somebody could pretty much solve all this stuff, I'm not saying that we could do this, but if somebody could pretty much solve this problem, what would be the next steps? And you get them to say, Well, send over the contract. Okay. What's number 7? This is the upfront contract of the next steps.
Love that.
So this is essentially setting the expectations of what's coming next. Okay. So what an upfront contract is it's essentially letting them know the next steps and getting them to agree to it. It's like, hey, like if you, let's just say Mike needed to go to his parents' house and he needed to get his wife on board, but he already knew it was coming up in 2 weeks. He would ask his wife, or he would let his wife know, like, hey, sweetheart, just to give you a heads up, we're gonna go to my parents' house in 2 weeks for dinner or something like that. Is that okay with you? And you get her to say, yeah, that's okay. That way, in 2 weeks, when it comes up, she can't come back and say, oh no, I was never okay with that. Well, you told me that 2 weeks ago that you were, right? So you let them know the next steps. And here's what the next steps are. Once they say, you know what, send the contract, let's get it rocking and rolling. That's when you pull back a little bit. And you're like, man, I mean, like I said, I don't know if we can get this thing done for you. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go bring this back to the team, or I'm going to go bring this back to my lender. Or I'm going to go bring this back to my business partner, or whatever, whoever your third party is, right? I'm going to go bring this back to them. I can only go back to them a couple times to figure this thing out. But I'm going to go bring it back to them, and I'm going to see what we can do. But let's just say we can do what we went over today. Are you ready to rock and roll today? And you're like, I don't really know. And you just let them know why. The reason why is because we're buying a bunch of properties every single week, and we have to secure your funds for your particular property. And we just want to make sure that you're taken care of. So that's why I got to know. Is this something that you want to do today? And they're like, yeah, okay, let's go. All right, I'm gonna go get on the phone with my partner or whatever the case is, and we're gonna get this thing rocking and rolling. I put the seller on hold, or depending on the situation, maybe the seller has to run for some reason. I never make it like a intense thing. I just make it like calm, cool, and collective, like it's just another walk in the park, right? So I put them on hold, and then essentially I come here. I negotiate / close. So I do the same exact thing. Like I just said, I go over every single thing that we went over before just to remind them. And I also let them know that I went to bat for them. I say something like, man, listen, talking to my business partner was like David versus Goliath, right? Like it was a war out there. But I did the best I could for you. But the good news is we can do this, that, and the other. And you let them know that you can essentially solve their pain, do this, do that, do the other. With that being said, we're going to have to be at 155. And then you just shut up.
I love that. I love that. Not too many people know how to be quiet.
It's the thing that gets everybody, like, that loses the deal for a lot of people. A lot of people are like, we can do 155. And then the seller's like dead silent. And they get nervous and they're like, well, what do you think? And now the seller gets scared. You're scaring the shit out of the seller. You know what I'm saying? It would be like you going to buy a car. If you're going to buy a freaking, because Mike drives Lamborghinis. If Mike's going to buy a Lamborghini and the salesperson's like, hey, yeah, so we can get the deal done for you for $3,000 a month. You ready? Mike's gonna be like, damn, bro, chill out. Like this is supposed to be a calm, cool, and collective thing. If the salesman's just like calm, cool, and collective, yeah. So the boss said that we could do this thing for $3,000 a month.
Love it.
And now Mike is just sitting there marinating in it.
Love it.
Now the prospect is going to do one of two things. He might agree, like, okay, yeah, let's get the ball rolling, or he's going to say no. Okay, if he says no, you got to figure out why. And if you miss the step, you got to go fill back that bucket up, right? You got to make sure that you fill all the buckets up. But let's just say the prospect's just trying to negotiate, and he's really he knows what's going on. You never negotiate live. You're never like, okay, well, what if we do 160? You always ask them, okay, well, where's the absolutely lowest that you would be willing to take so I can go back to my business partner and try to come up? I'm going to try my best. And you're always going back to your business partner, or back to your lender, or back to whoever. and then you're coming back in until you get the freaking close. Once you get them to say, yes, let's freaking go, I want to do the deal at 155, then going through the contract is a whole different sales process, which we won't go over today. But going through the contract is next level stuff, and maybe we'll go through that on another video. Maybe we'll go through like a seller finance contract or something.
Perfect. All right, so you want to tie this into some seller finance here? We got some time?
Hell yeah.
Let's do it. All right, so
let's think about this, right? In the steps, when you're thinking about structuring the deal with the fulfillment, right? Because that's essentially where you kind of pitch your structure of the deal. That's where I would be telling somebody seller finance, right? In the fulfillment bucket. And in order to know that, you have to be analyzing the pain and the rapport, right?
I love that.
So it's fairly simple, right? Like a monkey could do this shit with a cash deal. This shit is not hard. You know what I'm saying? Especially with a cash deal, with somebody going through, a foreclosure, or somebody going through a divorce or something, like, you know what I'm saying? It's super simple. The numbers are there. It's just fairly simple. You bring back up all the pain and you go for the close. Okay. So that's on cash deals, but seller finance deals, typically, just on average, the majority of them are not so evident. They're not the nurse going in and saying, "Hey, yeah, you are clearly concussed, or you clearly have a broken arm. Look at that thing; it's freaking huge." Right? It's not that. It's the doctor coming in who's educated, who does a little bit more of rapport and pain, right? And then he structures that. So let's go over. I think it's important for here's what it is, right, Mike? Somebody has to understand how to analyze the rapport and the pain bucket to figure out how to structure a seller finance deal, or why seller finance would work for this particular lead.
So true. So let's take it at a very just kind of easy level and talk about a true seller finance deal. All right.
Mhm.
And a true seller finance deal is going to be a piece of property that is completely paid off. Right. So if you're listening to Mike talk about all of the steps in the sales process, right? The rapport building and that all of that fact finding, really trying to dig for the motivation. The real thing that's going to let you in on whether or not you've got a true seller finance deal is, again, the who, what, where, why, and when of all of the components of the not only the seller, the property, and the loan. Right? So as we're kind of going through it, we need to know whether or not there's a loan on the property. And then we need to know if there's a loan that's paid off on the property, right?
Yeah.
So once we have that, once we dig the who, what, where, when, and why, or why and when, for everything about the seller, everything about the property, and everything about the loan,
This is so good.
We then need to know if it's occupied or vacant. And then from there, we can start to move into the actual pitch for seller finance. All right. So you heard Mike,
which is cool, right? So the seller and the property part, that happens during the rapport. The loan part, it could happen during the rapport, but most likely it's going to happen during the budget bucket.
Exactly. So now you get a seller, right? And the seller's just tied to the number. They're like, man, I want to get this number, right? You've tried for wholesale. You've tried for maybe novations. You're thinking in different ways. And now you're digging and you find a seller that has a piece of property that's totally paid off. This creative strategy is the one strategy that can set you apart from everybody else, because technically you can give the seller everything that they want as long as you get the time that you need. Okay? That's what seller finance is about. So when you're digging the who, what, where, why, and when, hey, Mr. Seller, who owns the property? Hey, Mr. Seller, what are you planning on doing? Where are you planning on going? Mr. Seller, where does this, again, where's the money going to go if you wind up taking all of this cash? Why are you selling? When are you selling? Right? All of this stuff inside of the rapport building and the pain and all that stuff for the seller, the property, and the loan. Once you sense that they are tied to a number that they don't want to get off of, you then want to know if it's occupied and vacant, and we can move right into the underwriting inside of our head, which isn't very hard to do because underwriting seller finance deals is just like underwriting cash deals. You just need to know a couple of different things, right? So once you get that all down and you now are faced with a seller that is tied to that 180 number and not willing to drop it. You heard Mike talk about like the commissions and stuff earlier. That's what I refer to as like stacking the benefits. And you heard Mike also say early on that, hey, I don't go in asking typical questions. He goes in and he understands that he wants to sound differently to the seller. He's got a different process in his mind because he knows what works. So a sales process coupled with really good question asking when it comes to seller finance is going to position you into a place where you can technically give sellers what they want. When you do that, you eliminate all of the competition around you because you're the only one who can do it. I'm not saying you're the only one, but there are other people that know how to do it. But ultimately, the more you understand it and the more you understand the sales process and what to ask, you'll then be able to structure some seller finance deals. Mike, there's some questions here in the chat. You want to answer some of these things? I think you got a few of them there.
So I was lost on how a contract gets done on sub to or seller finance after he agrees with all the terms. So there could be a couple things to this question. It could be like how the contract is actually written, or how do you go over the contract? But let's just say how the contract is written. For a sub two, it's essentially just there's some verbiage in there that states that you're taking over the first lien mortgage or the second lien mortgage or whatever the case is. And then there's an addendum that says that you're taking over the property sub two and all the things that come along with it. And you get the seller to sign off on all the things that way you cover your basis. And then for seller finance, it's essentially the same thing. In the P&S, it states that you're taking the property over and the seller is financing you, and it says the terms. Like it'll say, seller carry on mine. It says seller carry back. Let's just say it was 180, right? And then it would have the terms there. It would be 30 years, 3%, or whatever the case is, and that's in the P&S. For that, you typically don't need an addendum.
There's some confusion when people say that you're taking over the mortgage, Josh. So there's real confusion, right? Because when you hear subject to and you hear somebody's taking over the mortgage, you don't understand how you're taking over the mortgage, right? Some mortgages are assumable. You then say to yourself, well, do I have to qualify to take it over? And it's just very confusing. With subject to, you are merely making the payments on the mortgage on behalf of the seller. That loan is staying in place, and you are making payments on behalf of the seller.
Love it.
Confusion there.
So why don't we go over since everything pretty much the doctor, right? When the doctor gives the diagnosis, that's essentially in the fulfillment step, right? So as the doctor, if we're the doctor here, we got to figure out how do we give that diagnosis for a seller finance? How do we see when we're checking the heartbeat, when we're checking all the vitals and stuff, how do we see that this is a seller finance deal? What are the trigger points to that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Because
So
essentially, go ahead.
yeah, when I'm dealing with somebody, when I'm dealing with a seller, I'm not even thinking about the numbers. And I think that's where some people go wrong, right? You get into it, you're like, oh man, I gotta comp the numbers. We got a comment here from Donna Klein. She said, this is exactly what I needed. Cash Money Mike and Money Mike Gomes. I love that. And then
Right.
and then she says, are you comping while you're getting the info? Right? So the comping part of this happens. These are not one call closes with seller finance. That may be a
Mhm.
little misconception too, right? So when I'm dealing with sellers and I'm talking to a seller and I'm like, "Hey, Mr. Seller, how are you?" I have a little bit of a different, not a super different process from Mike because the sales process is all the same. I go into it a little bit more direct. When I start off, I want to know, are you the person? The first thing I want to know is, are you the person that can make these decisions, right? I want to know right out of the gate. I don't want to go through and then at the end say, "Hey, do you have to go ahead and ask
Mhm.
somebody?" I want to get it out of the way right away. This way I don't literally waste my time going through it, right? And the
Yeah.
trigger point would be for me is understanding the psychology of the seller, right?
Mhm.
So when you're asking questions and somebody is kind of nonchalant on the phone. They're like, "Yeah, I've owned this for a bunch of years, and it's been vacant for a bunch of years." I then again understanding so important. You've heard me say this 1,000 times. Understand the real estate process for people when it comes to buying and selling. It's hey, okay. Well, I understand that the guy's probably paying insurance on this house, whether it's vacant or not. I probably understand that he's paying the tax bill on this house, right? Whether it's vacant or not. Um, I then understand that it's totally paid off, right? He might have already told me inside the conversation, hey, I don't need the money, or, I'm not looking for a full cash offer. I live in Maine and the house is in North Carolina and whatever, whatever. So all of those things, when somebody's talking to you about that stuff, those are the trigger points.
Mhm.
Those are the trigger points where you're like, oh my God, like how do I now get this guy what he wants, or how do I get him what he needs, right? So as you're going through it and you're trying to figure out what they want and what they truly need, it makes it very easy. Mike says it, pulling the levers, right, to move the pieces around to get sellers exactly what they want. So if we know that they're caught up on a heavy down payment, we could give them a heavy down payment. If we know that they're not caught up on time, then perfect. If we know that they are caught up on time, we know we're going to have to pull the lever the other way and maybe adjust the down payment, right?
Mhm.
And maybe give them some interest or whatever we do in the underwriting process to get us from point A to point B.
Yep. Love it. Yeah, dude. It's like a football coach, right? He has a bunch of new players that comes on the team or something like that. Let's just say it's a college team. And he's analyzing the players, and he brings them through training and stuff like that. And he's like, "Oh my God, by the end of spring training or something, the coach is like, dang, this guy would be a really good freaking linebacker or something like that." You're looking at all the trigger points that would make somebody a really good linebacker or something like that as a coach, right? That's what you're analyzing. Essentially, that's what you're doing. So you're thinking about it, right? Like you should be talking to a lead, and you should be like, "Oh my God, I can solve this person's problem." They don't even know they have a freaking problem, and I can solve it. And
Mike,
by doing that, yeah.
that's such a great point because some people, most investors see seller finance as an option. It's
Hmm.
not an option, it's a solution,
Right.
right? So, like, I tell people all the time, hey, you can totally separate yourself from the pack and you can come out and you give sellers exactly what they want. And they go, oh, great. I'm just going to make them this offer and provide a high dollar option without really understanding what they want and they need. And you cannot use seller finance as an option. You literally take the power away from the strategy by going, hey, I can give you a cash offer for this. I can give you a second cash offer for this, or here's my seller finance option. Cannot do it like that. It's a solution. It's not an option. That's a great point, Mike.
Ooh, that's really good, bro. That's really, really good. I was on a coaching call last night, and a dude was having trouble. He was getting caught up pitching seller financing. He's like, every single time I do it, they're like, hell no, I never want to do this, right? And I'm like, okay, well, how are you pitching it? He's like, well, I go down the road, I tell them that I give cash offers, and I give them the cash offer, they don't want it, and I say, well, we have another option you can do. You can get the number that you want just over time. Do you want to do that? And they're like, no. And they keep telling me no. And I'm like, dude, you're not figuring out the wants and needs and then taking those wants and needs and essentially bundling up in a gift their freaking solution to the problem. Because like for me, if I'm stuck in like the budget step, right, and they need to go talk to somebody to figure out what they need as far as money for whatever reason, right? I'm going and giving them homework before I even get into seller finance. At this point, they don't even know that I provide seller finance. You know what I'm saying? I need all in order to make a pizza, I need all the freaking ingredients. So before I put that pizza in the oven, I need to know all the things. I need to get all the ingredients.
Such a great point, right? So like with your 8-step sales process, you're going in there, right? And you're building the rapport and you're finding the pain. And I just said the who, what, when, where, and why. So you and I are talking of exactly the same thing. Then once we understand the want and the need, we can then stack the benefits for the seller and provide the solution, as opposed to shooting it out of a gun again, right? Like on a buckshot, it's like all over the place. Here's the option for this. Here's the option for this. It's not an option. It's a solution, right? So it's like, hey, if I found somebody that maybe it was a vacant house and maybe they had an idea that they wanted to be a landlord and they tried being a landlord, right? And they ran through the process for maybe 5 years and they had to deal with all the tenants and they had to deal with all the contractors and they had to deal with the property and they had to deal with all this stuff. You're literally walking through the pain points that they are already aware of, telling them, hey, I'm going to take all of that responsibility on. You don't have that responsibility anymore, but I'm going to pay you like you had that responsibility.
100%. I'm working on a lead right now, right? And essentially, the guy's situation is he has 3 houses, okay? One of them was rented out. One of them has been vacant for a while, and one of them he lives in. Okay.
All right, so let's stop right there. Let's just stop right there and let's look into the psychology of that. Right? We can't go any further until we look at the psychology of that.
Love it.
Right? So now say it to me one more time. He's got one house that's vacant, right?
He has 2 houses that are vacant. The first one that's vacant was rented out, and he plans on just renting it right back out. The tenant's just up and left on him. Okay. So he's renting that. He's going to be renting that one back out.
Okay.
The second one, he's on the fence whether he wants to sell it or rent it back out.
Is it vacant?
It's vacant.
And then his third house.
Third house is his personal house.
With these 3, we've got one that's vacant and the tenant just up and left. We've got another one that's vacant with no tenant in it. My next question is, when did that tenant leave? Or how long has it been vacant for?
Like a year.
All right, so he's sitting for 1 year empty. You see, this is the stuff that investors aren't looking at. You need to look at this and say, well, the guy just told me the tenant up and left. So that's telling me, what is that telling me? That's telling me the guy didn't issue a lease. Maybe he did issue a lease, But since he has 2 properties that are vacant, I can tell you that he's got horrible management skills.
He's not the best landlord. Put it that
He's
way.
not the best landlord. I don't even know the guy, right? He's got 2 vacant pieces of property and his primary that he lives in. Now, I'm sure that at one point he said to himself, well, now how long has he owned these properties for, Mike?
He's owned them for a while.
All
Yeah,
right, so he's owned. All right, and how long has he owned his primary for?
8 years.
Okay, so he probably, let's say he bought them all at the same time. His mindset was, okay, I've got these rental properties that are going to pay for my primary. I don't know. I haven't asked the question.
Exactly. Yep.
Right? I haven't asked the question. I personally would have asked him.
Mm-hmm.
Me personally, if that's a guy on the phone with me, I go, great. When did you buy your primary? And he goes, I bought it 8 years ago. I go, awesome. Did you pay cash for that? When I say I'm getting into it, I'm getting into it. Because if you tell me that you paid cash for it, right, I know that you don't need it. If you tell me that you paid cash for it, you pulled a HELOC to buy these 2, and now these 2 are vacant, now you're paying some money here, right? I want to know about all of it, right?
So that's exactly getting into it, right? I pretty much broke it down and figured out that this guy has a mortgage on that personal house, right? And that's what I'm asking. I wasn't at this point, I'm asking about the situation, not the property in general, right? I'm asking about his whole situation, his personal situation, right? And I figure out that this guy has a mortgage on his primary house. I'm like, okay. So here was my next question. Oh, got it. So when these things were fully tenanted, were you essentially covering your mortgage with the rent roll that you were getting? He was like,
so
yeah.
did you see how Mike just kind of, he didn't ask he asked, but he asked in a roundabout way, right? He wasn't coming out forceful and going, hey, how much is your mortgage? And were those things going to cover it, right? He just very easily just kind of said to the guy, hey, listen, you've got a mortgage. Was the intention to have these 2 kind of cover that, right? And you're on the same field with the guy. You're on the same side with the guy. And what did he say to you?
He's like, yeah, actually, that's what was happening. And now, boom, here comes the motivation. Now that's the reason why I want to sell, because I don't know. I have this mortgage in place. Granted, the first one is a good rental for me. I'm definitely renting that one back out. Sucks that the tenant's left, and being a landlord kind of stinks, but I'm going to stick in the game. But that's why at this point I'm trying to figure out, I need some cash to pay off my mortgage. Essentially, that's what he said, to pay off my primary mortgage. So I don't have a mortgage. Okay. So he's like, I'm going to sell my property. So think about this.
I love this. I love
Yep.
love where this is going.
Yep. So he essentially tells me now his motivation. He comes up with it, and I'm just still plotting. I'm like, oh, I know exactly what's going to solve this freaking guy's problem. Okay. And I'm like, no, he says, yeah, I'm essentially thinking about, once I ask him, so once I get all that information, I essentially ask him, hey, so, I mean, what's got you wanting to sell the second property? And he's like, well, I want to essentially pay off my mortgage. That way, I can just kind of not think about being a landlord anymore. I only have one property at that time, and I won't have a mortgage payment. And the mortgage payment is essentially what I'm trying to offset.
Pause. Now, I love this. So Mike, by asking the questions, now understands that the guy, now I haven't asked the guy if he's working. I haven't asked the guy how old he is. I haven't asked him if he's got a retirement. I haven't asked him if he had a pension. Those are all questions that I would ask because I want to know how the guy's getting the money. But I haven't asked those questions, okay? But now I know, or Mike knows, that by that guy's intention was to go ahead and have that mortgage paid and then eventually pay it off but he did such a horrible job at managing it. This is exactly what happened in this situation. He did a horrible job at managing it. Now he just wants to off the properties to cover his mortgage. So what I want to do now, and what Mike wants to do now, is now take that information that he just gathered and he wants to turn it around and let's bring it back to your original idea of having those two houses pay your way. Now, what if I could get it to pay your way and give you more than what the house is actually worth? Here's where the opportunity for seller finance starts to open up. And while everybody's buying it at a discount, Mike G can come in and say, hey, Mr. Seller, let's talk about it. So let's talk about it, Mike. What's the ARV, or what are these houses worth right now?
I would have to go back and look at all that. Let's just say the first one's worth $250,000. Same thing with the second one. And the third one is worth $350,000.
Okay, so let's just keep it easy for everybody. We'll make them both at $250,000. Okay, these are what the houses are worth. All right. Mm-hmm. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to erase. Now, remember, Mike has asked the important questions: the who, what, when, where, why of everything. He's asked it all. Okay. And now he knows the motivation. He's put the motivation. People aren't going to tell you the motivation. You've got to play the player. You've got to ask questions and piece it together yourself so that you can understand how to offer a solution. So now Mike says to himself, all right, this guy's got a vacant place. I'm going to erase this. So I just want to go over it one more time. He's got a vacant place. The tenant just left. I want to know how long the tenant's been there, why the tenant left, what the tenant was paying. I want to know everything, right? Now he's got a second vacant house that's been open for a year, right? That the guy's been paying on and paying on and paying on. He's got a primary for 8 years. We now understand that those two properties were going to pay his mortgage, and ultimately it's not doing its job right now. And we know that he wants to live easy. When I say for free, I don't mean for free. I mean, he wants it to be covered, either his mortgage paid off, but what if we could get that mortgage covered and we could put a little money in his pocket and we can overpay for the property? Maybe that'll make a difference on whether or not he sells it to us. So now we know what the motivation is, right? We've motivated. We've already know that house number one is worth $250,000. House number one and house number two, right? Now we get into the underwriting portion of it, right? We understand to answer your question, Tana, is the comping part is very, very similar to wholesale. It's very similar, right? If we know that there's no mortgages on vacant one and vacant two, and those are totally paid off, and we know we can get $1,500 a month in rent, it's money in and money out. That's all it is. It's very, very simple. So let's say this one is worth $250. The second one is worth $250. I don't want to go too far down the line here with comping properties, but let's just say each house would bring in $1,500 a month each. It would be $3,000 a month in rental income. And we know, because we've asked the question about his primary mortgage, and his primary mortgage is only $800 a month, and we decide that we're going to offer him $1,500 a month. This is just a very easy example. We are now $1,500 a month positive. We could technically pay him $300,000 for these houses. It does not matter, as long as we get time. That's it. Mm-hmm. So understanding that when you go into these prospects, right? And I say this all the time, take your investor hat off, because there is no way, there's no straight on blueprint that says do it like this. Your job is to gather information and leverage the information and then throw it into your sales process. Mike's got 8 full steps that he goes through, right? And it says, here's the rapport, here's the pain, blah, blah, blah. What he means by that, that is the pain that we just uncovered, right? Again, the pain wasn't so visible where he looked like he was in trouble. The pain was that he was a landlord who had really shitty management, and he's tired and he doesn't want to deal with anymore. But he must have got into it because he loved the idea of collecting monthly income. You've literally opened up the doors for seller finance.
100%. Boom. So good, bro. So yeah, right? Like we bundled up everything that we gathered and we realized he really does have 2 options. He could just sell it outright and maybe put like $20,000 worth of work into it, sell it, and then pay off his other mortgage. He could do that. But what's going to happen when that happens? So think about this. There's two options for him. He does that. He sells it. He has to come up with 20 grand to put it in renovations. Then has to list it on the market, deal with all the things that come with listing it and the stupid freaking realtors and all the things that they do. Just kidding. Realtors are great.
He didn't say that.
I say that because my girl's a realtor and she's probably watching. Anyways, she doesn't have to go through. They don't have to go through the whole entire thing of actually selling it on the market, right? But the biggest thing, in my opinion, is the taxes. So they got to come up with $20,000 and then boom, get hit with a freaking big tax bill just to sell it. When realistically, what we could do is we could pay his mortgage every single month with the monthly payments that we're giving him.
Yeah, so I call it stacking the benefits, right? So you get down a number 7, number 8, right? You're starting to get into your pitch, and you're starting to pitch this to somebody. You start stacking all the benefits that they're already aware of, right? He told you he was a landlord. So you go through the property benefits, you go through the contractor benefits, the rehab benefits, the tenant benefits, the typical benefits, and then you get into the deal benefits, and you use those deal benefits, which is the money benefits, to the end, so that it makes an impact on the seller, right? You're not just saying, right, like kind of your point earlier, just guys coming out of the gate going, hey, I can save you, we could buy it as is, we can close in 10 days, it's all cash, we could save you the commissions, we could save you the closing costs. But nobody ever thinks to add it up.
100%.
Why not add it up and then make an impact on the seller at the end of your pitch where you go, hey, listen, I could save you $18,000 in commissions. I could save you $3,000 in closing costs. I could save you 20% in your long-term capital gains tax. I could save you 5% on the state. We don't have to use any banks. We don't have to qualify. Those are the guys who make the money, and I'll overpay you.
1,000 freaking percent. You know what it's like? I got an email the other day from a brokerage, right? I don't know how they got my email, but they got my email. And essentially, all they did was sent me a business card. And on the business card, all it said was, please contact us for your real estate needs.
Interesting.
What the hell does that do, bro? Like, if I'm gonna send something, right? I want some information from somebody. So I'm asking a question. Why would you ever sell your house or something like that, right? And that's what I'm doing in that email. That way I get some information. I need somebody to give me some information so that I can come up with a solution for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you're saying that somebody who sends
real estate needs, like, what does that mean?
What does that mean? I think there are some companies that do things not like subliminally, but like, and I don't know if that's the correct word, but keep it vague purposely to see if they could fit any box. Maybe I don't know because I wouldn't answer it either. I'm the type of guy that wants information, right? But yeah, I mean, there's definitely different ways to go about it. I know sometimes some companies kind of like, they're not all there. Contact us for your real estate needs. Just an interesting kind of play on words, I guess,
Anyways, dude, this is freaking great. This was
Yeah,
amazing. Guys, if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll do a quick Q&A at the end here to answer any questions if you guys have anything. But Kash, bro, this was a good freaking live, bro.
Yeah, man, I love being in here. I love being in here. We got to do more of them. I keep telling you, we got to do more and more and more and more. I love getting in this room. We got a lot of people in here today. We got anybody watching?
Yeah, bro, we got a decent amount in here. If we you have essentially a sales training, not a sales training, seller finance training.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah, I do.
Do you implement like sales in there?
Such a good question. So I'm about to I've come up with this idea that I'm gonna open up something called creative closers. And what I'm gonna Yeah, creative closers. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually walk people through my mind, like literally my mind, and kind of how I look at things and why I look at things. I look at things very differently than a lot of people. I'm not the end all by any means. I'm learning every single day, but I've got a very I don't even know the word for it. I've got a way to kind of ask questions. I'm not afraid to ask questions, right? I think a lot of this game too is before you go into anything, you better know who the hell you are. You better know who you are. You better know who you are before you go in, right? And if you know who you are, it'll give you the confidence to go in and not have to worry about the who, what, when, where, and why, or all of these different things. You go into it, you take your investor hat off, you go into it like a human being looking to buy a piece of property and create a solution for somebody. And in order to create a solution for somebody, you have to understand the strategy. Number two, you have to understand how to sell it. Number three, you're going to have to understand how to fact find and gather information. Number four, you're going to have to learn how to gather it all and leverage it against somebody. And then number five, you've got to stack all the benefits. You've got to stack them one by one and transfer your beliefs to somebody else seamlessly.
So here, this is really good. I was on a coaching call last night, and a dude hops on a call, and he ends up like essentially being a whole different person once he gets on the phone. Like you can hear it in his voice. He literally he doesn't sound confident. He doesn't sound like himself. He just sounds like he's like forced into the situation. And we get off the call and we're like, yo, just be yourself, bro. Like literally all you got to be is just like we're having a conversation right now. This is us in the coaching call. And we're like, yo, literally us talking back and forth right now is a different type of vibe than you and the seller. Obviously, the seller could sense that like you weren't confident and you weren't yourself. And the seller senses that. So I brought it back and I was just like, for me, I kind of have a superpower where I can just walk in and I don't want to say bullshit, but like I can act like I've been there before, right? So I used to be a barber, and I got in first day I was ever in a professional barber setting was New Year's Eve. I was thrown in the freaking fire. Don't have my freaking barber's license or anything. I'm in the middle of the hood cutting hair on a New Year's freaking Eve, right? At the most popping barbershop in my city. And I crush it. My haircuts didn't crush it. Like I didn't have the best haircuts, but I had the worst haircuts by far. But I promise you, like the confidence that I had talking to all the clients that walked through the door, and just the confidence that I had that I could do their haircut, right? Like allowed me to crush it. Okay. So for me, it's like a superpower that I can have. I can just go somewhere and freaking act like I've been there before. So same thing in sales. When I first started out talking to sellers, I acted like I've been there before. And then when I ran into a problem, I just said I didn't know, or I said I got to go talk to my partner and figure it out, right? And then I'll go to somebody that knew what the heck they were doing, and then went back with some sauce, right? But it wasn't until like once I got elite was once I started getting super educated in what you're saying. Like you can go into an appointment, even if you don't know everything, you can go in as yourself and confident as shit. And it's okay to let the seller know, like, oh, I'm not sure. Let me get that information for you. I'll be right back. Right. That's okay. You can do that. You can't do that though when you're not confident. Because then the seller is just gonna be like, click, right? The seller is gonna know that you're bullshitting. But if you're fully confident going into it and you got to go back to somebody and say, hey, yeah, I just got to go get the information. I'll be right back. And be like, all right, cool. That's fine. You know what I'm saying? You're not the final decision maker. That's no problem. I'm never the final decision maker, even now. However, now that I have been in this game for a little bit now and I'm educated and I've dumped a bunch of money into education, I understand all the things that we can give to these sellers. I don't get shook at all. Like I don't really have to go back. The only time I go back is when I'm negotiating, and I'm going back on purpose to do my thing negotiating. So I would say if you're just starting out and maybe you haven't taken a course yet or anything like that, and you're just dipping into YouTube stuff and everything, and you're just talking to sellers for the first time, maybe this weekend, or you've been talking to sellers for a month or two now, and you're like, dang, Mike is saying something really, really good here. I don't sound like myself on the phone. I sound like a different person. Try going in as yourself and super confident, and you're going to start creating more chaos. Then what's going to end up happening is you're going to be able to reach out to somebody like Kash or myself. We're going to be able to help you out, get the lead over the finish line. Then you're going to run into some money. Then you're going to get into some education, like paid education. And then you're going to be freaking elite. And you know what I'm saying? You won't have to go back and ask a Kash or ask myself, right, for help.
There's I go live every Sunday at noon on Instagram, and one of my students just sent me a call. He's like, hey, I recorded this call. Can you listen to it? And inside like the training that I provide, I tell people all the time, I go, all you need to do is bring me somebody who's willing to give you some time, and I'll structure a deal. It's an added benefit if they don't need the money. I've got a 10-minute call that I'm going to go through tomorrow. I'm going to go through it live. It is cringeworthy listening to somebody actually talk themselves out of a deal because they didn't know who the hell they were. This seller was like, I'll give you as much time as you want. The seller's like, I don't need the money. And one of my students literally talked himself out of it because he immediately went into it out of the gate and was like, well, here's what we can do for you. I go, you didn't even ask any questions yet. What are you offering? Mm-hmm. You didn't even ask any questions. And what is the goal of the conversation? You ready for this? The goal of the conversation was to put together a time for him to get inside the property. He went for 10 minutes with complete shit. Like you wouldn't believe some of the stuff, just firing out benefits without ever asking a question to at the end going, when's a good time for me to take a look at the property?
No shit, right? Yo, I was out to dinner the other day, and I'm sitting there, and the waiter comes up, and he's talking about all the freaking things on the menu and all the specials and everything, right? He didn't ask me what I like once. Immediately, he starts, hey, good evening. How you guys doing? My name is Rick. Da, 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 da. Here's what we have today. Boom, listed out all the wines, listed out all the entrees, listed out all the specials and stuff like that. I'm like, dog, I don't want any of that shit, bro. Like, that's not what I like. I'm just here for the salmon, bro. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so if I owned a restaurant, one thing I would implement is with my waiters, I would say, hey, try to build some rapport with the person sitting down trying to eat some food. Then you'll have a better idea of what you can suggest on the menu rather than suggest everything on the menu.
What do you love to eat? Such a
Right.
simple question, right? What do
It's a simple question, right?
What do you love to eat? Like, tell me what you love to eat.
Yo, hold on. What if I hate seafood, bro? And the waiter comes over and he just lists out all the seafood. Do you think him listing out all the seafood is going to help him get a tip? Or do you think him asking, hey, dude, what do you love to eat? Like, what's your favorite food? I freaking love filet mignon. Really? That's crazy. We actually have one of the best filet mignons in the city.
We have an amazing filet.
You know what I'm saying? And then I feel like, damn, this guy's fucking amazing. You're like, yo, give me the filet mignon.
Yeah, man.
You know what I'm saying?
It's crazy. It's crazy. And I think it's just again, it's just like newer, even seasoned investors, especially if you were stuck on wholesale for a long time, right? It's a numbers game, right? So you go into it a certain way and you're not really asking questions. But on that last call, I mean, this guy went through the whole thing for 10 minutes and at the end of it was trying to get in there and went like this at the end. Didn't even say, when's a good time for me to get in? Went, all right, so I'll call you tomorrow to schedule a time for me to get in. I go, wait a minute. You let him off the hook again. Like you've got to know what you're looking for when you go into conversations. And if you don't know what you're looking for, you've got to be inquisitive. And you've got to be genuinely inquisitive, not investor inquisitive, where you're like, oh, you know what? I've got to be a certain way. You've got to genuinely be inquisitive because you're the one who's going to buy the property. You're the one who's going to have to deal with tenants. You're the one that's going to have to do all these different things. So ask the right questions. And like to Mike's point, don't be afraid to ask them.
Yeah, you know what the waiter's problem is? The boss is probably telling him, hey, man, we have a lot of lobsters out back that are going to go bad. We need to sell them shits. Make sure that we put this as a special and pump it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Dude, I don't like lobster, dog.
Yep.
Or I bet they would sell more lobsters if they just asked the question and somebody said, dude, I really like lobster. They would sell the shit out of the lobster. They would make sure everybody that liked lobster in the freaking place got a damn lobster. But there's some people that like lobster that, you know, they weren't pitched it correctly and they ended up getting filet mignon. And now homeboy's got 20 lobsters that went bad.
That's why I've kind of like coined that question, right? When you go into these deals and you understand that money is like the biggest hurdle, and you go in and you say, hey, Mr. Seller, if I gave you what you want, how much time would you give me? You're asking just a generic kind of question that puts people on their heels. And they're like, I haven't been asked that before. And once you got them on their heels, if you ever watch Sugar Sean O'Malley fight in the UFC, he gets somebody on their heels and he starts going. And it's probably a bad analogy for real estate, but ultimately what you're trying to do is you're trying to give sellers solutions to a problem that you might not have uncovered yet. And you can technically like Mike's analogy with the restaurant, right? He might have an allergy to shellfish.
Word.
You know, he might have an allergy to shellfish. Mm-hmm. So ask before you start offering. Don't just start offering. Don't start providing options without finding out first and then provide a solution.
Mm-hmm. I freaking love it. Mike, this is a great live, bro. I think our viewers got a lot of value from this. I don't think I know they did. I appreciate you coming on here, dog. Every time we get on here, we pump out the content. We freaking bring the value. And every single time you have come on here, bro, my DMs have been flooded. Like, yo, that Kash guy is different. That guy's cut from a different cloth.
I appreciate it, man.
But, bro, you've been crushing it.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Make sure that for any of you who are still on here, join me live tomorrow, every Sunday live at noon. We'll be answering your questions. Mikey and I are going to do a bunch of other stuff together. Got a lot of things going on, so make sure that you stay connected to Mike and make sure you stay connected to myself. We'll continue to over deliver for you constantly.
Let's go at @CashMoneyMike_ on IG, going live tomorrow at 12. Please, if this video brought you guys any value, please hit the like button. Please subscribe to the channel so that you can see more of me and Mike's videos. Let's go, baby. Thanks for coming, Mike.
Later, brother.